Have you seen or read the news lately from international broadcasters? For people in the diaspora, the word Africa conjures up images of hunger, famine, and malnutrition. What do all these have in common? Can you guess? Well, it's food. The World Bank estimates that the global food and agricultural sector is worth $5 trillion, which makes food a commanding commodity in terms of consumption and trade. So I'm asking, who wakes up in the morning and doesn't think about food? Let me ask again, who woke up this morning and didn't think about food or haven't eaten? I'm Juanah Bellay. I am the Community Affairs and Evaluation Officer at Agric Development Company, the largest local rice producer in Sierra Leone. My talk today is about creating pathways for prosperity through agriculture in Sierra Leone. Well, the food we consume comes from land. This is a road that leads to a land. But it isn't just any land. Put some respect on it. It's what people who seek opportunities, optimists, and corporate traders call true wealth. There's nothing as valuable as it. Everything we possess, eat, and wear comes from it. It's God's greatest gift to us. And we've continued to leverage and harness it to provide the resources that we need that are essential for our survival. But this particular land is in Bonthe district and covers 3 chiefdoms: Boom, Yobaiko, and Bap. It has a riverine ecology and has 4 major rivers, 4 major bodies of water surrounding it and that flow within it when the rainy season commences. They are the river Sewa, the river Wanje, Lake Tibi, and the Great Atlantic Ocean. It is 52,000 hectares of true beauty, which when converted to acreage is 120,492 acres. If you've ever wondered what huge, gigantic, massive, and grand means, then that's it. Forget consulting your dictionary. The size of the Shaka Stevens stadiums is 0.66 square meters, which is about 163 acres. It means you can fit 788 plus Shaka Stevens stadiums in that land. It's a pristine land, ideal for large-scale cultivation, with all the elements necessary for a production that scale. I was awestruck the very first day I drove through that land. On the tractor over 3 years ago, it was harvest period, and the mood was joyous and ecstatic as the harvest had been good. The women were dancing and winnowing the rice. The men were threshing the rice, and the kids were tying the then harvested rice bundles in bushels. There was enough food, or condor, as they call it in their local parlance, making the rounds, and cigarettes making the rounds also. At about 6:40, we left the farm to come back to our residence. On my way, I was blown away and inspired by what I had seen. The cold wind breeze blowing, and the beautiful sunsets didn't hurt either. As I lay on my bed that night, I thought about the states and condition of things in our country and how we can have this stretch of arable land and there are people still going to bed hungry. And the cost of a 50-kilogram rice back then was 180,000 leones. With 70% of our population living below the poverty line, we are the 14th most poorest nation in the world, and with a minimum wage of just 500,000 leones, which is about $60, barely enough to live on for a month. To add insult to injury, a trade reporter read a Wilk earlier stated that we had spent a whopping $160 million to import rice. How, as a developing nation, can we continue to spend such staggering amounts to import the primary commodity of food crop that we consume, with such land available lying in waste? If just 30% of that rice import bill, whether through public-private partnerships or government support to smallholder farmers, will have started an agricultural revolution, got us on the saddle on the path to being food secure. It didn't make sense. Depending on other countries for such an important staple food as rice makes the country vulnerable to food insecurity, with the young, women, and the elderly most likely to be affected. But during the 1980s, the land at Tomabom and the surrounding areas was well developed in terms of infrastructure and economic activity. It was supported by the Tomabom Rice Development Authority Act of 1979, which was for the development and management of Tomabom area, to provide and implement schemes for the production and processing of rice. It was managed by a Dutch agricultural company headed by Mr. Peter Bolt. It was booming. Then came the war, the infrastructure, production, and everything declined. But rather than settle on the gloom and doom and why things haven't worked, it got me interested and I wondered what I could do to help drive this change. I have a law degree, but I work on a farm. Strange, isn't it? My passion for agriculture stems from my dad. He had spent months researching and conducting feasibility studies about viable crops to plant, their byproducts and uses, and the social impact of agriculture as a whole. He concluded by writing a report which he titled The Sustainable, Integrated, and Inclusive Rural Agricultural Project, SIRAP, as he named it. It had been his life's dream and his contribution to nation building, but died before he had a chance to implement his dream. But his ideas and work lives on through me. I envision a future where a country is food secure, in rice, and can feed its citizenry 2 times over and with enough to spare and export to other nations in need of it. We are at the bottom of nearly every development index in the world. 19% of children under 5 years are chronically undernourished. 43% of our population is food insecure. The 2017 Global Hunger Report puts Sierra Leone as the 3rd hungriest country in the world, after Chad and Central African Republic. The disparity in income level between people living in the provinces and us living here is wide and alarming. The stats for agriculture are impressive too, and eye-catching also. As many countries in the world face ecological limits of industrial agriculture, Sierra Leone has a landmass which is about 72,300 square kilometers, of which only 12.5% is under cultivation at any point in time. It has been the mainstay of our economy for a very long period of time. It accounts for over 40% of our GDP, and it is the largest employer, accounting for over 67% of our labor force. But these figures only look good on reports and presentations and when pitched to investors. They don't tell us the story of how inept we are at feeding ourselves and how we fail to leverage the available resources at our disposal. It doesn't tell us how several related projects are perfectly written but poorly implemented, a weak local content policy, and how a free tariff for rice importers puts pressures on our local producers and leave them without markets, or often at times sell at prices that are not market competitive, and how a significant proportion of our population has a growing distrust for all things made in Sierra Leone. And above all, the manifestos of nearly every political party expressly states and vows to achieve food security or self-sufficiency, but we're still hungry. Is it political gimmickry or a feasible ambition? We all saw how the slump in oil prices during the Ebola epidemic greatly affected our economy, and we're still on a recovery path. This calls for diversification of our economy and not to hinge our growth and progress on just one sector. At a global level, what has been done? The United Nations released the Sustainable Development Goals for implementation in 2016, and its targets are to be achieved by 2030. The second goal is to end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition and promote sustainable agriculture completely. Efforts to combat have advanced, but not significantly. But a few people and institutions have made some strides and have done some incredible work to achieve this. Our company has observed that most large tracts of suitable land are now either traditionally owned or costly to purchase, mired in controversy, or unavailable or unsuitable for commercial development. There is a lack of women and youth empowerment in the sector, a high rate of poverty among smallholder farmers, and very few financial institutions that are willing to support farmers and agribusinesses. A poor extension service delivery, an unstable and inconsistent local input supplies markets are some of the problems we're hoping to solve. We did our calculations and figured out that a calendar year is 365 days. If it's a leap year, it becomes 366 days. So assuming an individual consumes a cup of day, he'll have to eat 366 cups a year to be well fed. The standard measurement in a cup for a 50 kg bag is 175 cups, and a ton of rice is 100 kg. That means the per capita consumption for one individual is 367.5 cups. Our population is at 7 million. To feed this many people for a year, A cup a day will need 735 million kilograms of rice, which is about 735,000 tons, or 2,572,500,000 cups. Too many figures in such a staggering amount. It seems like a Herculean task and almost impossible to achieve. More so when the average agric production for smallholder farmer is between 1 to 2.5 hectares, and it will take massive land, labor, resources, and commitments from everyone to achieve this. If the land at Tomabom is fully cultivated, it has the production capacity and potential to provide 45 million kilograms of rice, which is about 45 tons. We've given these figures life and made our vision bold, realistic, and achievable, and committed ourselves to producing and feeding our people one at a time till we achieve our goal of feeding all 7 million people. Feeding Sierra Leone has been made easier. We work in Bonthe, which is the most sparsely populated district in the country, with just over 200,000 people, and is also the most underdeveloped and poorest district in Sierra Leone. But it has enormous potential for agriculture, tourism, oil exploration, and so much more. This is where we work, and we work with the poor, women, landless, and marginal or subsistence farmers in 13 villages in these 3 chiefdoms. We use an outgrower nucleus model scheme where we outsource 65% of our production to outgrowers and 35% is done by us. We cultivate almost 2,000 hectares, and our work benefits over 500 farming families, and it directly benefits over 2,500 people living in these chiefdoms and villages we operate. We provide these smallholder farmers with inputs and seeds on a credit basis. We introduce them to new technologies and mechanized agriculture, and learn them new and improved agronomic farming practices, provide better access to markets by specifying purchase prices in advance, and guaranteeing purchase of their produce. By doing this, we help them get higher incomes and provide them other opportunities and post-harvesting facilities for value addition to their produce. The advice and support we provide has greatly improved quality and yield. Some heroes wear capes, others wear hats, Wellington boots, and tattered clothes. But these people are the front line, championing the cause, overcoming things that seem insurmountable. They toil in mud under adverse weather conditions just so you can wake up tomorrow and every other day and have enough to eat and spare. The question now is, what is being done or can be done to reduce hunger and poverty in our country? How can we translate these figures and knowledge from being abstract and develop them into feasible, scalable, and sustainable models to help combat hunger and food insecurity? These are my suggestions on ways we can increase agricultural productivity and growth. And it's not a comprehensive list. Firstly, contract farming and outgrower schemes are proven to be an appropriate development model to achieve food security and alleviate poverty in rural communities, as land is readily available and easy to scale. Resources and production cost becomes cheaper as economies of scale is achieved. Smallholder farmers account for more than 80% of our national rice production. I am highlighting how small-scale agriculture should be considered as a national competitive farming model in its own right, and why we should recognize its potential to become a pathway to sustainable development and prosperity. Our outgrower scheme is a case study to show that it's a replicable model that should become policy and adopted nationwide. The impact on small-scale farmers and to the nation will be immense. Secondly, much talk has been made of rural-urban migration over the years. We have an overwhelmingly young, hardworking, and unemployed population migrating from rural to urban areas, leaving arable land lying in waste. At the current migration rate, more African will live in cities and rural areas in the next 30 years. With the decrease in interest from young people and low investment from both the business community and the government, the current spate of mass migration will render us unable to produce the amount of food needed to feed a large and fast-growing population. We have to make agriculture seem appealing to the young, and it is. It is often at times viewed as an archaic, primitive, and laborious profession where financial security seems elusive. I have a fierce and unwavering belief in its potential and the power it wields to drive macro-scale sustainable growth. Agribusiness is a huge job creator and one of the most effective ways to create jobs and empower thousands and millions of people. The value chain in the agribusiness industry, from food production, processing, and marketing, provide huge opportunities for employment, investment, and entrepreneurship. So if you're looking to start a business or invest in an industry that makes a significant social impact, provide jobs, and create sustainable wealth, agribusiness is surely the way to go. Thirdly, in agreement with commitments made when the new Partnership for Africa Development, Agric Initiative, the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program, known as SADeV, was signed by African head of states, this initiative aims to end hunger and food insecurity by 2025. We must commit and annually allocate a minimum of 10% of our national budget to agriculture. We have to make better use of information technology. Information technology can support better crop, fertilizer, and pesticide selection. It also improves land and water management, provides access to weather information, and connects farmers to sources of finance and credit. Simply giving farmers information about crop prices in different markets will increase their bargaining power. We also have to improve market access and more especially improve rural infrastructures such as road, is crucial to raising productivity. We have to reform land ownership with productivity and inclusiveness in mind. Land reform clearly define property rights, ensure the security of land tenure, and enable land to be used as a collateral will be necessary if we are to realize potential productivity gains. From a legal perspective, appropriate legislation should be adopted to ensure the farmers' rights are protected and can be enforced. To save the farmers from the clutches of money lenders, adequate credit facilities should be made available at reasonable rates in rural areas. The Community Banks and Financial Services Association should be strengthened to provide loans to the cultivators, and they should be made aware of the presence and benefits of these institutions in their communities. We have to support initiatives like the farmers' market, buy locally produced and processed rice, buy local varieties rather than imported varieties. Most importantly, we need political goodwill, good governance, good policies and strategies in the food and agricultural sector to make our collective dream manifest. Often I get asked what's cool about agriculture. There's a lot to like. Being exposed to nature, alternating office and outdoors, reaping the fruits you've labored to plant. It never gets boring and you never stop learning. And being surrounded by the locals, their simple way of life and warm-hearted gestures, living life to the fullest with so little is something worth emulating. As youth, we are a generation at the cusp or intersection of macro-scale growth and change. We are generating new ideas. Leveraging the power of the web and technology, we can adopt sustainable business models to create a fresh, new, and exciting narrative for the land that we love. I challenge you and everyone to choose and support agriculture. Through collaborations, we can proffer solutions and launch promising new ideas on how we will feed and nourish a growing population, inspire people, and develop our nation. It's been a pleasure sharing this with you. Thank you very much.